Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Today we're going to talk with the Jewish community, and we're also going to discuss Jewish-Catholic dialogue. And joining me in today's discussion is Rabbi Frank Muller and Father George Balasko. Welcome to our show, both of you.
Thank you.
Shalom. We also know that Road of Shalom is celebrating a significant anniversary this year, and so we will talk a little bit more about your congregation and its anniversary a little later on in the show. Before we get into our discussion, it might be good, Rabbi, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, and so the folks that are with us could get to know you a little bit better.
Oh, thank you. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and actually was a business major in college at Berkeley, and had change of heart through all my involvements in the Jewish community. Growing up, I was a camp counselor and a youth group leader and a Sunday school teacher. And at some point, I just decided, I'm really doing a lot of things in the Jewish community. Maybe this is something I want to do as a profession. And I made the switch I graduated from Berkeley with a business degree, but then I entered Hebrew Union College in the rabbinical school and became a rabbi. I have served congregations in St. Louis and Roanoke, Virginia, and I've been in Youngstown now for 20 years.
Well, we're very happy to have you in Youngstown. I'm sure you miss the West Coast, but we're glad to have you
Not
here.
really.
All right.
It's a little too hectic out there.
Oh, I would imagine.
I like the Midwest a lot.
Well, tell us exactly about the role of the rabbi in the Jewish community. Is it considered a spiritual leadership role? How is that in relationship to something like a pastor or a priest in a parish?
Well, actually, the role of the rabbi has changed significantly over the last half century. And I'm sure Father Balasko can remember the days of Rabbi Berkowitz, who worked very closely with Bishop Malone. And in those days, the primary role of the rabbi was to be the emissary to the non-Jewish community. And so Rabbi Berkowitz was in a lot of civic organizations, and he was a public figure. And he and Bishop Malone did many joint ventures together. Mm-hmm. The congregation really was secondary, because the rabbi was the Jewish community's ambassador, if you will, to the rest of the community. That was very important to the membership. That has changed radically now, where we're encountering a lot more fragmented Jewish identity on the part of modern American Jews. And so rabbis have really changed their focus from being out in the community to staying in the synagogue, what we call in-reach rather than outreach, to keep our members connected and involved with their Jewish lives. So that's really what I do. In addition, of course, to all the religious and pastoral and life cycle functions, is I am working to create programs that keep today's Jews connected to the synagogue.
And I'd like to bring Father Balasko into the conversation. Your long experience with dialogue with the Jewish community as a Catholic priest, as a Christian, how have you seen that evolve, and how have you seen your role as a Catholic Christian leader evolve?
Well, 2 years before I was ordained, a document out of Vatican Council II called Nostra Aetate, in our times, talked about our relations with the Jewish background of Christianity. Remember that Jesus is Jewish, and he wasn't Croatian, he wasn't Italian, and so basically in the sense, and under Father Maley, who taught us scripture in the seminary at St. Mary's and down in Norwood, Ohio, Cincinnati Diocese, basically I was open to that. And coming back and being ordained in 1967, the Vatican document Nostra Aetate came out in 1965, so I already had that background. And under the the tutelage and the example of Bishop Malone, he was very close with Rabbi Berkowitz, as you said, and basically we were already implementing that. And also the candor of Ehrlich, who was the cantor over at...
Cantor Ehrlich.
Yeah, and basically he liked the singing of Cantor Ehrlich and assessed any music from the Fiddler on the Roof.
Right, he was famous for being Tevye.
Tevye. And so basically, and so I just fit right into it in the sense of understanding our roots of Christianity and Judaism. And there's more and more coming out every day. A.J. Levine, you just met her a couple weeks ago or so. They're down in, where, North Carolina?
In Naples.
Naples, in Florida. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And basically, that insight and the parables of Jesus and all that, and we've had her on 2 occasions in memory of Rabbi Meyer, and the lecture series that we've had going on now for 20-some years. So basically, it's just something, it's my golf game. I need it in the sense to understand myself and Judaism as the roots of Christianity.
And that's really important for us as Christians to understand our roots and to understand the wealth that we have gotten through the Jewish community. You know, when we talk about ecumenism or interfaith dialogue, it's always important to look at those things that unite us and those things that we can build on as people of faith. What would you see, Rabbi, as some of those things that we have in common that we can celebrate, that we really need to build on, not in a spiritual sense, but in a communal, social sense?
Well, you know, I'm glad you asked that question because, you know, for so long, the relationship between Jews and Christians was one of mistrust and distrust, and the very name of Jesus, you know, inflicted fear in the hearts of many Jews because of so much persecution through the centuries. And really in the last 50 years since Nostra Aetate, there has been a significant endeavor to come together, to not that we should pave over our differences, but rather we should celebrate our commonalities and then really just respect the differences. You know, the operative word used to be toleration, you know, that we'll tolerate each other. I don't like that word. It's not a good word. And I don't want to be tolerated, but I want to be respected for my beliefs. And I think that's what dialogue is trying to do today, is let's see where we're in common and celebrate those similarities, but also recognize that the things that we do differ, that's okay. We can be comfortable with each other. We can accept each other for those differences and still have a good relationship. So that I think is where the new interfaith dialogue has occurred, rather than trying to say, well, we're all exactly the same. We're not. We have differences, but that's okay. You can still, you know, admire someone and have a relationship with them even though you don't agree on everything.
Sure. We're going to talk more about that, but we're going to take a quick break. So please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Whether it's passing on medicine, a blanket, or something as simple as a glass of water, that's how compassion works. And that's how Marinol works, hand to hand to hand. For nearly 100 years, Marinol's been passing on your help to the priests and brothers working in 26 countries around the world. Marinol, an American Catholic organization, dedicates 86 cents of every dollar donated to their programs, serving the world's poor and powerless. And that's how it works. Compassion flows from your hand to the hand of someone in need. Hand to hand to hand. That's Marinol.
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 We are in our 7th year at Cristo Rey Jesuit High School. One of the things that's unique about this school is that our kids work 5 days a month at offices in downtown Chicago to pay for their education. We got telephone calls the first day thanking us for sending us those kids to their companies. 95% of our kids are the first ones in their families to finish high school, and 87% of our graduates are in college right now. No one believed that it would be as successful as it is. Well, it's obviously caught on, and we're very, very excited about it.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Rabbi Frank Muller and Father George Balasko. During the break, Father George, you had mentioned that we're changing our terminology. We used to use the word dialogue, but there's another word when we talk about interfaith relations.
Especially with our Jewish background, Jewish Christian studies. You know, what can we learn from one another? And I think the Jewish community has come out with a document since Nostra Aetate, its 50th anniversary, basically that, like A.J. Levine talking about the Christianity that she experienced as growing up and understanding the Jewish roots of that, and that we have something to contribute in the sense of the theology that has developed since Vatican Council II, and the beginning of following the Rabbi Jesus out of Nazareth. You know?
And before the break also, Rabbi, we were touching on the similarities. Can you express more about that and expound on that?
Well, yes, I can give you just a couple of examples and some of the misconceptions that Jews and Christians have of each other. I think by and large, Jews often think that in the Christian world, all you have to do is believe in Jesus and accept Jesus to be saved, and that you don't have to do anything. And conversely, Christians often think of Jews as following a religion of law. It's all law, and they really don't have faith, because Christianity is the religion that gave birth to the idea of faith. That perhaps Jews don't have such a strong concept of God, and because, well, Judaism is an ethnic culture with some religion in it. But Jews do have a very strong God concept. I mean, it's in our prayer book, and we do believe in God, and we do good deeds, what we call mitzvahs. And conversely, to be a good Christian, you have to do more than just believe, don't you? You have to do good works, and we learn that from the Gospels, in which Jesus in the parable of the sheep and the goat says, "So as you have done to the least of them, so you have done unto me." You gave water to the thirsty, you gave food to the hungry, you visited the imprisoned. So you can't just talk the talk, right? You have to walk the walk. So in that sense, we're very similar. We both have strong faith components and the obligation to do good deeds. That's one example. Another is that Jews will say, well, there's the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So that's three gods. Therefore, Christians are not monotheists. And of course, that's not true. It's all one God, right, and it's part of the same God. So I think Jews often miss that point. And I think we do have a lot of things in common that we may not realize. And that gives us more of an opportunity to come together.
And let's talk about how fundamental the Bible is to our faith, whether we are Jewish or Christian. The Bible really is fundamental as to who we are. Talk a little bit, Rabbi, about the Torah and the importance of the Bible, the Old Testament in the Jewish religion.
Well, whenever I do a wedding, I present the couple signs a ketubah, which is a written document that's 2,000 years old that used to spell the obligations of the groom towards a bride, but now is kind of focusing on the emotional relationship that a husband and wife should have. And I always explain that the first wedding in Jewish history was when God married Israel on Mount Sinai, and the Torah was our ketubah. The Torah is our guidebook. And it spells out our obligations not only to God but to the world, and it's the fundamental document that's in every synagogue that we read from every week, and it's our foundation for everything that we do and believe.
That's really a beautiful image, and I think to have those images where people can resonate with and kind of visualize really does help. I'd like to bring Father George back into the discussion, and let's go back to Nostra Aetate. We know that was a very short document in Vatican II, but a very powerful document. How has that really changed relationships, not just with the Jewish community, but with other non-Christian communities as well?
Well, yeah, it's much broader than our connection with the Jewish community. In fact, we just celebrated 50th anniversary of that, and Father Jeff Mickler from this Community Society of St. Paul meant it was a miracle that document came out. And basically, because it's small, but it did an awful lot to understand the background of Christianity in Judaism. And as the brothers in the faith, as I think when John Paul II went to visit the synagogue in Rome, he mentions that. And just playing on that document, not only do you go to the Muslim community, but the Hindus and also the Baha'i, and we've been doing that at Temple Alamet, which is the conservative congregation on the north side, of having these other people coming in and sharing with us, the understanding of these other religions. Not to convert, but to understand. And so basically, that document, Nostra Aetate, was very important for us. And then it added on the 50th anniversary, the Catholic Church has no missionary initiative directed towards Jews. And it's always from the beginning, but we're becoming more aware of that. Sure. And the Jewish community has salvation within the fact that they are united to the Torah, and it's more than just the law. It's as you said, Rabbi. It was a ketubah in the sense of marrying the people of God at Mount Sinai. Mm-hmm. But again, this is very interesting. I'm at the villa, and so basically they know I hang around with rabbis. And John Fuzio said, "How could Jesus be Jewish? His mother was Italian." Okay, and that's because not a lot of Italian parishes are called Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Right.
Okay,
Immaculate Conception.
But
sure.
That's from Haifa. That's from Haifa. Right. That's basically that order started in the sense at the time of the Crusades. So, but I find that intriguing in the sense that how could he be Jewish because his mother was Italian? But again, to know something about the Islamic community and all that, and also the Hindus, and also the like I say, the Baha'i, and the Sikhs, and so forth. It's all there in that document. Huh?
We've got about 1 minute left in our middle segment before we take a break and talk specifically about your community celebration. I'd like Father George to tell us about the menorah and the bus that you have there, briefly.
Right now?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, briefly, in the sense, this is how the Jewish community honored me. And basically of dealing with the 45 years plus of working with Nostra Aetate. They honored me with the Brandeis Award, in the sense, and then just recently in 2012, Guardian of the Menorah. And I'm one of the 4 Gentiles in the sense that were honored by the Jewish community over the 40-some years. They had Bishop Malone, and also we had, I'm trying to think of the politician, Harry Michel, and then Jesse McLean, and then myself. And it's coming up again in May and in June of another person being honored from the Jewish community. And so they honored me as a Catholic priest, basically, of what we've been doing with Nostra Aetate. Thanks to Bishop Malone and Father Eugene Maley. When I went down to see him one time about what are we to do with Jewish Christians, he said, help them to be the best Jew that they can be. And so, if I'm quoting him correctly in the sense of let them be freed to worship the one God that we have, and a new book out by Dr. Eli, in the sense the Jewish Gospel of John talks about triunity instead of trinity, and I find that very intriguing. And so,
well, we'll talk more about that, but we're going to have to take a break. So please stay with us. We'll be right back.
There is a place where a total stranger will give you their blood. There is a place where someone you never knew will save your child from drowning. A place where people from 7 states away will turn up at your door and give you food and shelter after a flood. There's a place where a person who doesn't look like you, talk like you, or dress like you will stretch out their hand and put it across your shoulders and say, everything is going to be okay. That place is called America, where we look out for each other, and it's up to us to keep it that way. When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.
33 million Americans have descended into poverty. And as their futures fall, so does our nation's.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Rabbi Frank Muller and also Father George Balasko. And we know that Rabbi Muller's temple, Road of Shalom, is celebrating a significant anniversary. And so I'd like to have the Rabbi tell us about that. But before you do, give us a little history about the Road of Shalom.
Oh, okay. Thank you. the history goes back to 1867. So we're celebrating our sesquicentennial 150th anniversary. And sometimes just thinking about the number of years doesn't give you as much perspective as much as if you think about what was happening in history at that time. If you can imagine, it was 2 years after the Civil War ended. So that's a long time ago, and that's a lot of history. At that time, there was a migration of German Jews to this country. It was the first wave of migration before 2 million Eastern European Jews came in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Most of these immigrants were young. They were poorly educated. They were from small villages in Germany rather than the big cities that knew about the reforms going on in Germany. So they came to this country with little or no knowledge about Reform Judaism, but they established Road of Sholem, and the reforms that they enacted were practical ones and not really ideological ones, because they had to work on Saturday. So in order to make a living, so they had the services on Friday night. And all the changes that they made were from practical considerations. And so that's how Reform Judaism began in Youngstown in 1867, and just continued to grow until it reached its zenith during the 50s with the explosion of suburbia, and the congregation had close to 700 families, and it was quite a large number. And since then, of course, we've diminished in size, but the congregation has continued to go on strongly. And the community has maintained all of its institutions, from the Jewish Community Center to the Jewish Federation to the Jewish Family Service to Heritage Manor and Levy Gardens, which cater to the aged in our community. So institutionally, we're as strong as ever, although our numbers have gone down a little bit. But we're celebrating 150 years of being here in Youngstown as a Jewish community and as a congregation.
And what would you like to see, not projecting another 150 years, but what would you like to see down the road or in the future for your community?
I would like to see the young people who are leaving the community now, and they move on to bigger cities, usually Atlanta or New York or Chicago. And I'm hoping one day that Youngstown will have a renaissance as the best small city in America, with a good quality of life, and that young people will realize that there are just as many problems in a large urban environment as there are in a small town, and one is not necessarily better than the other, but there are advantages to each. And my hope is that the young people will one day come back, raise their families here, and the Jewish community will have a resurgence of population, because that's our biggest concern now is the demographics. What's our Jewish community going to look like 25 years from now? That's the big question.
And I really think that that's kind of fundamental to most communities. What's going to happen. We do know that many of our young people move out because of jobs or opportunities. And so many of them have become extremely successful. And if they would perhaps come back or see this as their true home, so to speak, and to help with a renaissance.
And there are things you can get in Youngstown you can't get in New York City. There's the sense of community, the sense of coming together in crisis or in times of celebration, and it's just a close-knit community that's hard to replicate in a very large city where everyone really, people don't know each other, and you just you pass everyone on the street, and in Youngstown you pretty much know everybody.
You do, right. Rabbi, you touched on it when you talked about your congregation as Reformed Jews. Talk briefly about the other forms of Judaism and how do they relate to one another. If you could do that, please.
Well, there is Reform Judaism, which basically is under the belief that the Torah was not written by God, but that was written by human beings, albeit divinely inspired. And therefore, since it's a human document, it's subject to change and emendation. There's conservative Judaism, and there are two conservative temples in Youngstown. which believe in a little more strict interpretation that the Torah was written by God, but that there are rules of interpretation that allow for changes to be made. And then there's the Orthodox, which believe that Torah is an absolutely immutable document given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, and that every faithful Jew must observe all the commandments in the Torah, and there's no wavering from that. And we have a small Orthodox congregation in the community as well. But the beauty of Youngstown is that all of our congregations get along extremely well, and we do programs together. And when B'nai Israel had a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, we were invited to his home to celebrate some of the Jewish holidays. That would never happen in a big city where sometimes Orthodox rabbis don't talk to their Reform colleagues, because there's animosity and there's problems between the two communities. This is such a wonderful community that just understands the spirit of not just ecumenism, but we're a good intra-faith community, not interfaith, intra-faith, because we all get along extremely well.
Very good. Father George, in your experience over these many years in dialogue and study and reflection, we've got about 2 minutes left of our time together. What would you like to see as some of the hopes and dreams of this dialogue and study continue?
Well, basically, I think I would like to see the Christian side of the ledger understand the background of the early gospel, and when Jesus acting from his Jewish background, in the sense, when he says, I came not to change one jot or tittle of the law, those are the smallest Hebrew markings in the alphabet. And then he goes on to the Sermon on the Mount and says, I shall not murder or kill, and then you can't have anger against your brother. That was the interpretation of that. And so it was like a warning track in the sense that they use in Judaism, in the sense.
And by the way, when people say Judaism is a strict religion of law, and then Christianity, it's just all about love. Actually, Jesus made it harder, because in Judaism it says, thou shalt not murder, but Jesus added, he widened the fence. He said, not only should you not murder, you can never be angry. Yeah. That's a lot harder to do. It's easy not to murder someone for most people, but just try not being angry at someone. So I think Christianity made the following of the law even stricter.
I agree with you. In fact, you have 613 laws in Judaism. We have 1,736 in canon law. So,
well, that's another show. That's another show. But, we're down to our end of our show, and we certainly appreciate Rabbi Muller, your presence on our show today. Father Balasko, as always. We love having you on to explain more about your involvement with dialogue and studies, and we thank you for that, and congratulations on your well-deserved awards. Thank you both for being with us.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And congratulations on your anniversary as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.